Welcome to episode 17 of the Food Bank Show. My name is Steve Bennett, I'm your host. Today we're going to be looking at controlling the controllables. Many people, of course, quite rightly now, are going to be feeling a little bit anxious about what the future may hold. Maybe people are anxious about getting that dreaded disease. Maybe we're anxious about work and will we have a job out the other side of it. So today we're going to focus on those things that we can control. I've got two brilliant guests that are going to join me. We've got Lydia Kimmerling, who's going to join us all the way from Ibiza. She is a certified life and business coach. And then we've got Pinkerton, who wrote a brilliant book called Smile Again. She'll be joining us about 10:30. We're going to look at together how we control those things we can control. There's her apps. Oh, that way. I could never do the weather. I always go the wrong way. That's her brilliant book, Smile Again. If you are new to us, we have three purposes. First purpose is let's get all these experts that we know that have helped me sort of write Fat and Furious, all the doctors that have contributed to my book, all the nutritionists and the brilliant chefs, and let's get them dialing in every day to give us advice about how we find a silver lining in this very difficult time. Maybe you're locked down at home, maybe you're not traveling around as much because you're not going to work. So can we find a way of getting some benefit out of the lockdown period? Maybe you're going to learn a new hobby, maybe you're going to learn to cook something different and live really healthily. The other thing, of course, is that's really important that right now that we try and help those around us that need the most help. In our own country, in Great Britain right now, there are more people than ever that are relying on our food banks. Sadly though, those food banks are getting less donations into the collection boxes in the supermarket as we all rush around sort of doing our daily, weekly shop much quicker than we normally would. Lots of people are forgetting to give those food donations. So we're supporting the Trussell Trust. We'd love you to donate £2, £5, £10, whatever you can afford to the Trussell Trust on the text number, or go to the Just Giving page that is there. I could never do the weather. It's there somewhere in the sky. We really need your help. We really need your donations. Jack, my son, and my family and everybody have said we will pound for pound match your donations all the way up to £100,000. We desperately as a family want to support the Trussell Trust and the food banks across the UK. You're going to wave at me, Jack. You're going to say hello to him. Oh, you're there. There's Jack down there. There's my son. He's driving the show today.
Oh, you nailed it.
He's all on his own. He's all on his own again. Where the rest of my children, I've got no idea where they are this morning. Now, before we get our first guest on, we ask you every day, what did you cook for the first time yesterday? The whole concept that I've got is that with the McDonald's and the Greggs and the Subways and all these fast foods, the KFCs all shut down, with the oh, crikey, I wish that could be indefinitely. And with the restaurants all closed, we have to change our eating habits anyway. So maybe it's time to rethink what you're cooking at home. Maybe you're going to try new recipes, new cooking ideas. To that end, our book, which is Primal Gourmet, we've put every single one of our recipes free of charge on Primal Living's website to give you some ideas. And also, if you go to Primal Living on Instagram every single day, my co-author Hannah Anderson is putting up cooking and recipe tips there to try and inspire you. But we've got a competition, and we say to you this: cook something new tonight. And when you do, take a photograph, give us a bit of description about what it was you cooked. Go to Primal Living on Facebook, and on Facebook, show us what it is that you've cooked. And what we'll do, we'll have a competition. Jack's pointing at me like crazy.
I've got photos.
You got photos? Put them up then, Jack.
Right,
put some photos up of what you've cooked, and then we'll have a competition, and we're going to give £1,000 worth of 3 jewellery to the winner. Or, if you prefer, come and spend a weekend in Warwickshire in a boutique hotel with my family and I, and we'll go out for a nice, big, healthy meal. Whose is this, Jack?
This is Sally Taylor's. It's her bolognese over spring greens.
Wow, that looks very nice.
And then we have Claire Henner's. She hasn't described what it is, but it looks like a very tasty salad.
That is brilliant.
What else have we got?
What I cooked last night, Jack?
Oh, okay, fine.
So I'm at the moment fascinated, since we had the brilliant chefs on the Caldaces earlier in the week. I'm fascinated at the moment by flax seeds. So I'm putting flax seeds and poppy seeds on everything I can think of. The night before I made some crackers out of flax seeds. Last night I did a tuna, and then I covered them with olive oil, then flax seeds and poppy seeds, and I think they tasted all right.
They taste amazing.
They did taste amazing.
Two more.
But two more from you at home.
From Sally Taylor.
Both from Sally Taylor.
This, she's called Forage Through the Fridge.
Wow.
So it's a bit like our sell-by date.
Yeah, she's called that Forage Through the Fridge. I'm just repeating in case you can't hear Jack, because he doesn't have a microphone. We call those at home the SBD meals. Do you know what that stands for? It stands for the sell-by-date meals. We always make sure that we don't throw anything away.
We've got a chicken hash.
And there's a lovely chicken hash. So keep sending in your ideas. It is a competition, and we will have prizes at the end of lockdown. Now, today, controlling the controllables. I'm going to give you a little story going back in time. About 5 years ago, I and my son-in-law, with a guide and a doctor, we trekked all the way to the North Pole. It was minus 40 degrees. It took us 10 days to walk to the North Pole. We were fearful of polar bears. We were fearful of frostbite. We were fearful of the ice cracking. We're lying in our tents on the North Pole, which are just icebergs, no land mass underneath, cracking and cracking every night. And when we were there, I spoke to my guide and I said, look, how do you cope with the anxiety? How do you stop being fearful of tomorrow? And we discussed and we discussed and we discussed. And because I've got a really poor memory, it might be a sort of distortion whether we came up with it or whether somebody else came up with it. But we arrived at the fact of the acronym that fear stands for false expectations appearing real. False expectations appearing real. We were lying in bed at night, fearful that the ice would crack and we'd be swallowed up by the ocean. But that was a false expectation appearing real. We were fearful of frostbite. That one's a bit different because our doctor sadly did get frostbite, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. It could have been fatal. He lost his thumb in the end. But the point is, if we are fearful of things, they're normally expectations that appear real, but they just aren't real. And I always say, don't mix fact and fear. The facts are the facts. They normally already happened, and the facts are that in this case, if we wash our hands, if we social distance, if we stay indoors, don't go out much, if we eat real food, then the likelihood is, A, we won't get it. B, if we do get it, because we're eating real foods and we've got our immune system as strong as we can, then it'll have minimal effect on us and our family. So the facts are the facts, but try not to get too anxious. Try and concentrate on today and today only. And that was the other thing we learned when we walked to the North Pole. Don't think about we've got another 9 days of minus 40 degrees, no let up. Just think about today. How do I get through today? How do I get the most out of today? And even when we woke up in the mornings, we'd look outside our tent at 4 o'clock in the morning at the North Pole, light the entire time. And our guide said, just look around you and take in the scenery, the icebergs, take in the sky, take in everything you can. Try and enjoy every moment, even though you're absolutely freezing. So look for the positives. Think about one day at a time. Don't think about tomorrow. In fact, there's a great quote from Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu says, people that have depression tend to live in the past. People that have anxiety tend to live in the future. And if you are at peace, you're living in the present. Happiness is for those that live in the present today. And I know that's a massive oversimplification. But if you're depressed, try and think about today, not what's already happened. If you're anxious, don't worry about tomorrow. False expectations appearing real. Focus really on today. That's the advice I've got. But I'm not an expert in this area, but I know a couple of people that are. So let's go all the way to Ibiza and let's speak with Lydia. Good morning, Lydia. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, perfectly. Good morning, Steve. Thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. So we've never met before. So tell me and everybody else your story.
Well, the short version really is I'm a master certified life and business coach. I've been in the industry for 10 years now. I always say before it really became fashionable, before wellness was a thing. Now I'm here in Ibiza. I'm from London originally, and my company's called The Happiness Explorer. I have a team of 15 coaches currently, another 15 in training because I train coaches also. And we really just help you to explore and find more of what makes you happy in work and in your life.
Brilliant. So you're very much into this area that we're talking about today. So
Mm-hmm.
talking of controlling the controllables, what advice have you got for everybody that's feeling maybe overwhelmed or uncertain about what tomorrow might bring in these really difficult times?
Yeah, it's something I'm hearing a lot from the people that I'm connected to. And I felt it too. Just because I've got all of these tools doesn't mean that there's days where I don't have bad days. The first week we were in lockdown here, it came completely out of the blue. My mum was sick. My boyfriend is probably not going to work again for a very long time. So all of these things are happening outside of ourselves, and we start to think about everything that can go wrong. And I was doing that week, and I felt the anxiety come. But thankfully, I have got all of my training, and I know that as soon as we start to feel anxious, as it says in that quote, we're no longer being present. You're worrying about something that hasn't happened yet. Your acronym there as well. So really, it's accepting that life has always been unknown. That's just another word for life, is that it is unknown. And the more that we can accept the unknown, the more in control that we feel. Especially with the uncertainty, it may seem like it's all uncertain. So what we can begin to do is come back to the present moment and do a quick check-in. How am I feeling right now? Have I got a roof over my head? Have I got food in the fridge? Are my family okay? And if you do a quick check-in in that moment, it'll bring you back to right now.
That's really, really good advice. I always say to my children, and don't get me wrong, I love social media, but first of all, comparison is the theft of happiness. So if you're constantly comparing, you're never going to be really happy. So if you're constantly comparing to what life was like pre-COVID, forget it. Comparison is a theft of happiness. But also only focus on stuff that you can control, because if it's outside of your control, why worry about it? Just worry about those things you can control. Keep your social distancing, keep washing your hands, keep eating real foods, and try and be in the moment. I also think you just hit the nail on the head there. Gratitude is probably the most important thing for happiness. And my granddad always said to me, my granddad used to say, I don't like it when I say to somebody, how are you today? Oh, all right under the circumstances. And my granddad always used to say, the circumstances, you woke up this morning and you are breathing. Both my parents are dead already. So the circumstances, you're breathing. There's the first thing to be grateful for. You've just said also a roof over your head. So it is finding those things, isn't it, to be grateful that we're okay.
Yeah, and you know what? Your granddad, sorry, said, yeah, that when you wake up, that first moment you wake up is the most important part of your day. What I realized was that first week when I was waking up, I broke a habit that I'd worked on, and I was looking at my phone first thing. I'm in different groups, information was coming at us from all directions, and I was absorbing it all, all this fear, all this collective anxiety. So that first moment you wake up, make sure your phone was put onto airplane mode. Before you even look at your phone, just stop and ask yourself, how do I want to feel today? What's my intention for today? Another reason this is important is because the other thing that is causing people anxiety is this sense of having to accomplish loads right now as well. Or I should learn a language before this is finished, or I should have started my business that I've been dreaming of starting. Just take each day at a time and set an intention at the beginning of that day for yourself it's that thing, check in on your inner world before you give yourself to your external world.
That's really, really good advice. And one of the things I was going to ask you, because in your very first sort of minute you said, I've got certain tools, and I was about to say, give us some of those tools, and there's one straight away, isn't it? Don't wake up, get on your phone straight away, stick it in aeroplane mode, and just say, how do I feel? What's my intentions for today? But don't be putting too much pressure on yourself, thinking you've got to achieve, because achievement sometimes is just being happy. and just happy that you're going to have a nice day, and that advice of trying to just disassociate yourself from the news. When we first started this over 2 weeks ago, we had this ticker tape on the bottom that was a live feed from the BBC. It's called an RSS feed. And day 2, one of the doctors said, why have you got that live feed on the bottom? I said, well, to keep everybody up to date with the news while they're watching. He went, no. He said, if we're social distancing, if we're washing our hands, if we're eating real foods, why do we want to know what's going on in the rest of the world at the moment? We do want to know that there's hunger in the UK and we need to help and support that. But other than that, we don't need to watch the news, because anxiety is so dangerous, is it not?
Yeah, it's so real, and it's extremely common, anxiety as well. What I would want anybody who's watching to know about anxiety is, quite often we begin to define ourselves by it. You know, I am an anxious person. What I want you to know is that it's not who you are. Okay, it's something that's happening as a result of what you're thinking or what you're doing, but it's not who you are. To help explain this better, just think of a time when you've been sick and then you're well again. What's the first thing you say? Or when you've been hungover and then the hungover's gone, what do you say? Or maybe you've had a very stressful period and then you're calm again, what do you say? Normally we say, I feel like myself again. Because that's your natural state. Your natural state is to feel good. That's our natural state. But we do a lot that removes us from that, worrying about the future, worrying whether we're going to get sick, worrying about dad who's got lung issues, whether he's going to get sick, worrying whether we're going to lose our job. None of that, if that hasn't happened yet, you don't need to think about it right now. So other tools for helping to overcome anxiety, I would say just keep it simple, because the mind is already overactive and generally that's what's causing it. Another really simple tool is to come back to your breath. So we can use our body to affect our mind. Just breathe really slowly, in for the count of 4, out for the count of 4, for as long as you need to, until you feel your nervous system settled back down.
That's great advice. I read something the other day that I'd never seen before, and I thought it was beautiful advice that says, if you've got a favourite colour, so mine's this certain green that I remember from my childhood, the darkish green, close your eyes, think of blowing up the colour of your favourite balloon, but really, really, really slowly, and just focus in on breathing into that balloon, breathing in, taking your nice deep breaths, and really be conscious of your breathing. And the problem I used to have was that when somebody told me to breathe in, my stomach would go in, which is completely opposite to what should happen. Yes. So just being conscious that when you're breathing in, you're trying to get your stomach to go out. And then as you exhale, try and get your stomach to go in. And just take some time for yourself. And with that breathing techniques and just taking that minute out, I think as you start to get anxious, breathing is, I think, one of the best tools, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's so simple, yet it's something that we neglect. Most of us are not breathing properly or to our fullest potential, and we kind of take it for granted because you just do it and you do it from the day that you're born. So one thing you said there, I think, taking time for yourself, that's a great thing to focus on right now, is just taking some time for yourself. And that's going to look different for everybody, but when it's with yourself, focus it on joy. If you can just focus on some of the small things that bring you joy, whether it's cooking and, tuning in here, looking at your Instagram, finding out more about healthy ways to cook, or maybe it's playing an instrument, or for many of us now, we are with our children 24/7. I have a 2-year-old, and really just being present with him and finding joy in the moment will bring you back to the moment as well.
Yeah, but at the same time, as you've already said, don't put too much pressure on yourself, because that's exactly what happened to me yesterday. I've got a 4.5-year-old at home, plus a 12, plus a 14, plus a 16, plus my 18-year-old over there. And I started to beat myself up, going, hang on, you've never had so much time on your hands to spend with the children, and and you haven't done it today. And I started to beat myself up, and I went, yeah, but everybody's happy, and it's still been good, and it's still been great. So that mindful of not over pressurizing yourself. I've got quite a few questions coming in. Let's dive in and see if we can maybe answer some of these. Andrew Hunt says cauliflower sausage cheese bake, homegrown carrots and peas. I think that's some cooking advice there. That's really, really cool. Marvelous says, how did you do the flaxseed crackers, please, Steve? I have 2 bags full of them. Dead easy. I got the flax seeds. I ground them all up in a blender. I got an equal amount of water to the flax seeds, exactly the same. I chucked in some herbs and then ground it all into a mix. Put it onto a sheet of baking paper with some oil on. Got another sheet of baking paper with oil on. Squashed it in the middle. Rolled it out with a rolling pin. Then got my pizza slicer and made them into the shapes I want, put them in the oven, and depending on how thick you make them, Marvelous, depends on how long you have to cook them for, but around about half an hour. Luke has asked a question, how can we be more mindful while in isolation? So particularly mindfulness while we're in isolation.
Good question. So really, mindfulness to me is just being present, but sometimes that needs more explanation, because kind of like, if I just said to you be more present, you still got the question of how. So I don't know whether you've already got a meditation practice, but meditation is one of the best practices to begin to understand what that means and how to be mindful. Something really simple you can do, and this is exactly how I started meditating 10 years ago when I was falling asleep on the kitchen floor, is sit down quietly, set your timer for 5 minutes, close your eyes. Don't try to not think. We can't really ever stop thoughts from happening as such. So the practice of being mindful is just witnessing the thoughts, allowing them to come up. Maybe there'll be a thought that feels like an anxious thought. Practice being the observer and go, oh, all right, anxiety, I see you, I hear you, and then allow it to wash over you. And this is really the practice of mindfulness, becoming more self-aware. Do that each day, 5 minutes, then up it, 6 minutes, and who knows how long we're going to be in lockdown for. Before you know it, you might be sat there for 60 minutes.
And isn't it interesting, because I always thought, you don't need any of that stuff when you're asleep, that must be mindfulness. But what a lot of the doctors have been saying to me, it's quite different, because while you're asleep, you can't actually control your thoughts. But mindfulness is exactly what you've just described there, which is close your eyes, set a timer, and then just be aware of what you're feeling and so on and so forth. And in some ways, almost letting those feelings go, if you like. And it is taking that time out. It's very important, isn't it?
Yeah, I try to start most of my days. In fact, this is what I've done. Is, as I said, I have a 2-year-old. Thankfully, he sleeps for about an hour and a half in the day, but I also run a business. I have a huge team. So I need to find time to do everything I want to do. I was telling myself, I don't have enough time. And that was making me feel quite anxious and stressed. So I am waking up now about 5:30, 6 to make sure I start my day with that practice. That's how much I know it enables me to feel happy, that I would sacrifice a bit of a lay-in to get up and do it. So everyone's different. Find your own way. Don't push with it, but you do have to find time for it. You do have to fit it in.
Yeah, no, really be conscious of making space for it. Lydia, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Can we get you back in a couple of weeks' time?
I'd love to. Thank you. And you're doing such an amazing thing, by the way.
Well, we're just trying.
You and your family.
We're just trying. And again, in some senses, that's helping avoid the anxiety. We've got something to get into that's a little bit different to the norm. So we've changed our sleeping habits a bit. We're going to bed a bit earlier because we have to get up and plan the show. And it just gives us a focus. And if you look at the NHS, if you sort of read my book, one of those things of avoiding depression, avoiding anxiety is to get something to focus on. And we're all different. It could be learning to cook. It could be start to read a book. It could be picking up the piano if you haven't done that for a long time, or guitar. It could be that you're going to make real effort every day to phone a couple of friends that you haven't spoke to in a long time, but trying to get into something is really important, isn't it? And that's kind of one of our to be honest, that's one of our motivators for doing the show. So absolutely lovely having you on, Lydia. We'll speak to you again soon, and enjoy, in as much as you can, being locked down in Ibiza, because I'm sure there could be worse places.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And could I just say, because this might be helpful to some of the listeners, my team are gifting free 30-minute coaching sessions to anyone who needs it, whether it's anxiety around your work, whether you feel unmotivated. It's just for the month of April. If you follow me on Instagram at Lydia Kimmerling, the link is there, and they're available for everybody who's watching today. So
Brilliant.
thank you for having me.
And we had your website up the whole time, so people can also get you there. Lydia, God bless you.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you. Thank you
Bye.
very much indeed. That was the incredible Lydia, an expert in this area around mindfulness. We talked about breathing. We talked about different techniques, and just sort of being present was great advice there. I'm going to answer a couple more quick questions, and then we're going to go to Anna Pinkerton, who is the author of Smile Again. Let's have a look. Marla said, I decided a few years ago I do not want messaging services on any phones because I was facing 40 to 50 messages at one time. Absolutely amazing. I'm so calm, and even better, I have all the messages I need. That's really, really good advice. I learned from a friend of mine some advice, and he said the problem with interruption media all the time, so the mobile phone messages, the emails coming in and all those, is that our attention span is not what it used to be. In fact, there's some research that I mentioned in the book that they think that the average child today will have an IQ 10% lower than our generation, because there's no longer that ability to concentrate on anything for long enough, because it's always interruption. And a good friend of mine said, get into the technique, if you can, certainly if you're in business, of setting out your own agenda. So his advice was, and this is what he does every single day, and he runs a really successful company, all his team, all his friends, all his suppliers, all his colleagues at work know that he only looks at his emails, his phones, everything on a Tuesday and a Thursday, which gives him all day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, to be in the present, in the now, thinking of new ways forward, which I thought was really, really good advice. So I like that, marvellous. Yeah, try and turn it off where you can. Haley says, I'm trying to get my husband on board with low carb, but he has asked why we are allowed so much healthy fats. That's a really, really good question from Haley. Haley, it's as simple as this. In the 1950s, a man called Ancel Keys was looking in America for the reason why their president had a heart attack. They didn't realize that it was mainly down to smoking back then, and the other contribution was pollution from lead in cars and things like that. So he had the hypothesis that it was saturated fat that was causing heart disease, and he had some evidence, but we've learned since that evidence was completely fake news. He had this study of all these different countries, and he only selected the real small trials that backed up his hypothesis and ignored all the rest of the data. So it was all based on fake news. And it kind of made a little bit of sense in one sense, because they were saying saturated fat, we know saturated fat in the arteries can cause the arteries to clog up, can cause a heart disease. What they didn't look at was basic biology, and the fat in the arteries, the saturated fat in the arteries, can't come from the food we eat just because of the way our system breaks down fat. The fat in our arteries is by and large from sugar, and in particular one type of sugar called fructose. So when we have table sugar or we have a Coca-Cola, our sort of table sugar is half fructose, half glucose. We have glucose monitors because glucose can get into the bloodstream, but we don't have fructose monitors because fructose can't get into the bloodstream. What happens in the liver, all incoming fructose from fruit, from table sugar, from fizzy drinks, the liver converts it into saturated fats. It's called lipogenesis. In other words, it's the making of new, let me get it completely right before somebody corrects me, de novo lipogenesis. It's the creation of new fat. And that's the fat that clogs up the arteries. So it is saturated fat that clogs up the arteries, but it can never be from the fat you eat. And here's the thing about fat. It does not matter which fat you eat, whether it's saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, whether it's completely saturated, does not matter at all which fat you're consuming. The question is the fat real or fake? So for example, Vegetable oil isn't made from vegetables. Vegetable oil is a man-made oil, mainly from GMO. We think vegetable oil is really, really dangerous. We also think oils that they put into packaged foods that are hydrogenated are really, really dangerous. So the only question when it comes to fat that you need to tell your husband, Hayley, is simply this. Is the fat I'm eating natural or is it fake? If it's fake, it's very dangerous. It can cause cancer, it can cause all sorts of nasty, nasty things. If the fat you're eating is from Mother Nature, as it always has been, whether it's, if it's from, what have I got here? Here we go. If it's from avocado oil, totally natural. If it's coconut oil from coconut, what a silly thing for me to say. If it's coconut oil, it's got a smile on the face. If it's full fat butter, absolutely fine. Even lard is really, really healthy. Even ghee that we cook a lot of Indian food with is really healthy because it's all natural fats. So you've got to tell your husband, to answer the question, it is not about saturated fat that we eat that causes a problem. It is whether the fat is real or not. Hopefully that's answered that one. And Leah says, Lydia, after a major trauma 10 years ago, you're the first person to actually make some sense. My life, as I see it, ended then. Maybe it could change even after so long. Thank you very much for that comment, Leah, and being very honest there about your trauma 10 years ago and saying that Lydia there is the first person that's really made sense. That's absolutely brilliant. Elliot says, does adding coconut oil to my black coffee count as breaking my fast? Elliot, it does count as breaking your fast in my world. Many people in the medical industry have different views on what breaks a fast. I think it does break a fast, but if you're going to use putting coconut into your coffee to fill you up so you don't then go and eat carbohydrates, it gets the thumbs up from me. That's how I actually broke being a carbohydrate freak that would have carbs all day long. That was the very first thing I ever did, was starting putting butter or coconut into my coffee. Don't do it anymore now because my body knows how to burn its own body fat. Right, let's now go to our next guest, which is Anna Pinkerton. Anna, author of Smile Again. There you are. How are you?
Hello, I'm really well, thank you very much. And I feel very lucky for it. How are you?
Yes, I feel really well, and I feel lucky for it too. Tell us all about yourself, about your book, and what we should all be doing right now to try and stay positive.
Well, that's a big ask. Well, I'm in my 27th year of practice as a trauma practitioner. So I'm a psychotherapist, an art therapist, and trauma specialist. The book Smile Again came from a marriage of partly my professional career at the time, and then my own experience with post-traumatic stress disorder, and a complete rupture in my physical and mental health. And so I kind of married the two together and reverse engineered. I spent some time thinking if I know how to help people recover from burnout and breakdown, if I reverse engineer that information, then I will know how to prevent it. So that really was what the book was, motivated by.
So I've got a really interesting question, or I think it's interesting. Post trauma stress, PTSD and burnout. I want to know in a minute, are they similar? Do they have similar ways of manifesting themselves? But because we just had a comment actually from Leah who had trauma 10 years ago. What's the advice of somebody to help somebody that's had a trauma or feeling very anxious about the future?
Okay. Well, I see it slightly differently. I guess the thing about anxiety is you can't live without it. And I work with people with profound post-traumatic stress disorder and panic disorders. The best way to deal with anxiety, from my experience, and I'm 29,000 hours in, is to meet the anxiety where it is. Don't fight it. If you demonize anxiety, it will think it needs to stay around to make sure you're aware. It's really important, this early warning system. You can't live without it. You've got to kind of approach it and ask it, what are you trying to tell me? It might sound a bit bananas.
No,
but the anxiety is always trying to tell us something. So we sometimes have a term called generalized anxiety, which means it appears to be over everything. And it's not just that I'm anxious driving a car or going on public transport. I've got feedback on here. Are you hearing it?
No, we can hear you absolutely fine.
All right, I just thought I'd check.
No, I want to just quick pick up on that. You say we can't live without anxiety. Is that fight or flight? In other words, if we were never anxious, the lion would have eaten us, or if we were never anxious, we'd cross over the road and get hit by a bus. So is that what you're saying, is that we all have to feel anxious? Is that have I got that right?
We do, and I think we're hearing a lot of demonizing of it, and of course it's crippling when you're poorly with it. There is a massive amount of anxiety at the moment because there is a real threat, and people are in a situation that they probably are coming down from the shock, but they also are probably beginning to realize they need to mobilize for plan B, which is incredibly difficult, right? Because we've had this massive shock. We only partially saw it coming. We couldn't really compute what it meant, what lockdown meant, which was, it might be, and I've heard people say, well, I thought, I need to stay at home more or not to go to bars and restaurants. I didn't realize, in a way, that's my business either in pause for a really long time, or my business potentially going, or my job going. Or my family being dissipated and not being able to be together. So the threat's very real here. To say to people, don't be anxious about it, it's really not going to work. If you understand why the anxiety is there, it will start to reduce anyway. Yeah, like you say, you have to have an early warn system. If you're going towards a busy road, your head's going, watch out. Now what's happening is we're all going, watch out, what the hell is next? Right? This is very real. Nobody's making this anxiety up. But
and the other thing we're doing, isn't it? We're walking around the park or going into the supermarket and you go, that person's too close to me. That's not 2 meters. I felt myself doing that, and you're going, just chill out a little bit. You know?
I've done the same. I've like, am I the only person that knows distance here? But it's the person that asked the message, sent the message about previous trauma. What will happen for people now, and it's a massive concern in terms of people burning out and breaking down now due to this situation, is that somebody's coming into this pandemic with a trauma template, i.e. they've had trauma or burnout trauma previously, that this situation will trigger the old template that they've already experienced. And that's incredibly important, because what can happen is people will say, I'm overreacting, the symptoms are disproportionate to the issue, but they're not, because you've already, how do I put it? You've got a certain amount of circuitry. Let's say you've got this much. This is your circuitry in your brain in order to deal with everyday things. And if you've already had trauma or burnout, maybe it's shrunk, right? Maybe it's only this big. So you get a pandemic, you've got to mobilize on multiple levels to survive this best you can. It will not take as much for those people to feel overwhelmed.
So is it a bit like, I've got an addictive personality. I smoked for years, I was obese for years, and then when I stopped the smoking, then I started to drink too much, and then, and then what I've had to do recently is get addicted to, exercising, because that's just my personality. And we're saying that, am I barking up the wrong tree? Or are we saying that if somebody's had trauma, it's much easier, they're more likely to get trauma the second time? Is that what we're saying?
Yes, absolutely, perfectly put. If somebody's had a burnout one time, they're way more likely to burn out a second and third time if they haven't been able to work on what happened in the first place. And often people who burn out do kind of disappear for the world for a while. They get themselves reasonably well and don't properly know that there's a neurological imprint of that experience that's still at play. And it's the same for this as well. People are going to be very poorly, because not just because of the pandemic, but what they've come into it with.
Yeah.
for sure.
And we've talked a lot about, in my book, I talk about things like, breathing techniques, try and get a hobby, try and think about others, because as you think about others, that may help you de-stress yourself. What sort of techniques or tools could you maybe offer advice for people that are, maybe if they've not had post-traumatic stress before, but people are just now more anxious than they've been before? What sort of tips and techniques could you offer for those people?
I think the first thing is to check out what the internal narrative is. What the decisions people make about how they feel are incredibly important. And I think the thing to do now is what will sustain you. Let's say we're in this for a bit longer than we anticipated. What's going to sustain you, let's say for the next 6 months to 2 years? And if you're drinking a bottle of wine or something as an anesthetic every day, maybe there's something else, like a walk around the block or do some gardening, that will help your system understand that you're taking care of it. In terms of self-awareness and self-care, the brain is usually asking us what are we doing to look after self? Yeah. So the first thing you can change is how you're talking to yourself. If you're beating yourself up, you're swearing and haranguing yourself for feeling anxious in the first place, or not doing enough to mobilize to get through this, or you don't know what to do because you're frozen with fear. If you turn that against yourself, it will be 1,000 times harder. So be kindly and companionable to yourself in how you speak to yourself. That will actually give you energy back.
Yeah, no, that's just great advice, because quite often we do beat ourselves up just too much, don't we? We always think life should be perfect. We always think it sounds like I'm name dropping, but I was with Mr. Branson once, and we were sitting in a hot tub, and and he went, the problem with life is we always think we've got to do more, and he said, I'm not up there with those internet billionaires and probably never will be. And he said, but you have to sometimes just sit back and go, stop trying. And even when my reason for mentioning that is that we all think some people are perfect, but nobody's perfect. And sometimes we take ourselves too seriously, don't we? And we think we've got to perform all the time, and we're always after the next. Whereas sometimes, if we're having negative thoughts, don't beat yourself up. It's a bit, I always say, it's like, isn't it?
Yeah.
We know we should sleep 7 hours a day. So you wake up in the night, and I get so stressed if I wake up in the middle of the night, it's like, I'm not getting my 7 hours sleep. That stress itself prevents me from dropping back off. So
well, how you relate to yourself internally is almost like an internal poison. If I call it inner brutality, and if you've fallen out with yourself a very long time ago, and you beat yourself for not doing things and doing the wrong things, it actually injects adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream and slowly, chronically poisons your system. So I mean, inner brutality is like a parallel pandemic.
Yes.
So we wouldn't say, I tell you what, go and drink some poison. But the way that we think about ourselves and relate to ourselves is poisoning the system.
Yeah. So that cortisol that we'd get with that moment of anxiety being chased by the lion, or that moment of anxiety stepping out in front of the bus, that short burst of cortisol is okay, but prolonged cortisol from being too anxious, or on the other side of the coin, the depression is dangerous. So we have.
Well, it's just it's almost like a pulsating. You never give your system time to calm, which is why things like power naps and meditation are good. If you can train your body to accept them. So you can't just decide to turn the anxiety off. What I say to people is, imagine you've got a dial. There's no switch. This is not a decision. This is learning to relate to yourself differently, so that you turn the dial down slowly and incrementally on the anxiety by actually asking what it's there for.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're anxious, you go, what is that about? What's it trying to say? And you might think, oh, okay, it's financial, or I'm worried about somebody, or I don't feel very well. Find out what it's about. It's nearly always about something.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really, really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm saying don't be. That was the brilliant Anna. We lost connection then to the worldwide wibbly wobbly web. So apologies for that. Wasn't that great advice from Anna? Her book, again, is called Smile Again. If you want to rush out and get that, that will be great. And we will make sure we get Anna back on the line. Well, we've only got 5 minutes of the show now, so we'll probably try and get Anna back later in the week. I thought some amazing advice there. And I think my takeaway, maybe yours may be slightly different, but my takeaway there is, first of all, anxiety is normal. Without it, we'd all be dead because the lion would have hit us, eaten us years ago, or we'd have stepped out in front of that bus. So anxiety is normal, it's natural, it's an inbuilt self-defense mechanism. What we need to do is make sure we can, sort of control it so it's not there the entire time, otherwise it's released too much adrenaline and cortisol. So taking time, trying to understand it, try and breathe through it, and taking time for yourself. Right, let's turn to your questions. Andrew said, I didn't realize that MCT oil in my coffee was breaking my fast. Andrew, honestly, it's so subjective and different people believe different things. So what I would recommend, go on to YouTube and type in carb dodging by Dr. Dan Maggs. And under there, he's got his belief, and he's really studied what breaks the fast. And the only reason I say that that probably does break the fast is because at the end of the day, there are some calories going in, albeit in a oil. Nicholas says, Anna, what things do we need to be mindful of with anxiety during lockdown? I think the answer to that, Nick, is as we've just heard, be conscious of the fact you're being anxious. Don't beat yourself up for it, because anxiety is a normal human reaction. It's a normal feeling. It's try not to let it get the better of you by being in the moment, bit of breathing, focus on today, try not to focus too much on tomorrow, the day after. Don't think about what this is going to mean long term. Just be mindful of today. Lots of people talking about things they've been cooking, which is great. Hayley says, I made your pancake pizza for the first time. They were a big hit. They're great, aren't they? They really are fantastic. And Hayley says, when I went on and on about what is real fat and what's not real fat, because her husband is worried about eating too much fat. She said, thanks for that. He was listening. Garima says, and Garima's in India. Hi. In fact, we've got Iftikhar from India saying, good morning, Steve and Jack. And Garima from India saying, hi, I'm in lockdown. People are not going outside. No work, no gym, no social life. So they become upset regarding what would happen now. How they overcome from the situation without exercise and diet. And it just is a real problem, isn't it? In one sense, Garima, in that we're all having to adapt to different ways. If you can't go out and exercise, if you go to the App Store and download the Primal Living app, in there we've got lots of exercises that you can do without going to the gym. So, in fact, there it is. There's the app. Is it that way? Oh, I can't do that this morning. There. So, top right button. There are two sections there that you could look at for when you're in the gym. But the top right section is all the exercises you can do at home without any weights. So there are ways of still exercising at home. If you're in the UK, of course, or anywhere, you could watch Joe Wick's program at 9 o'clock every day, where he's doing PE at home without, again, any equipment. But it's a real challenge. And I quickly just wrote down and looked at the book that I'd wrote and picked up some things. And this is what I came up with, sort of 7 things right now that you can do in this difficult time. So the first one is try and get a good night's sleep. Obviously, that sometimes is easier said than done. The way we're coping with that as a family, just going to bed earlier. Yeah, I used to maybe watch the news every day at 10 o'clock. I'm going to bed now before 10 o'clock. getting in, we'll call it circadian rhythm, so I'm in rhythm with the sunrise and sunset, so getting a good night's sleep, trying to get into something like cooking, reading, maybe working on your family tree, maybe getting out in the garden is great. Other things, try and eat well. Good nutrition, good food equals great mood is something I've always believed in. And if you spell the word desserts backwards, you'll realize that it comes up with the word stressed. So healthy eating is really important at the moment. I think we've got back. Anna, oh, thank you for coming back.
No problem.
I thought I was going to be all on my own for the last 10 minutes.
I thought I'd done something then. I was like, oh, what have I done?
It's not you. We lost everything. We lost connection to the outside world. So let's pick up where we were. There's a question from Nick. Anna, what things do we need to be mindful of with anxiety during lockdown?
Okay. Well, what I've been hearing, Nick, and it's a great question. I've spoken for hours and hours over the last month with people. The threat's real, but it's tricky to keep it in proportion. One of the things I ask people to do is actually say to themselves, I'm safe. I just don't believe I am. And that's what anxiety is a lot of the time. It is disproportionate in a way. It makes sense it's there, but sometimes it just kind of goes and goes and goes and starts ballooning out and taking over. I think it's really good to check out if you get physical manifestations of the stress, of the anxiety. Are you getting palpitations, headaches? Sometimes you get numbness, nausea, and movement of some description usually does help. Now, that's usually because it starts shifting the system, the adrenaline cortisol that's actually already in the bloodstream. So literally, even if you go for a short walk, your subconscious is saying, oh, he's looking after me. That's good. Because our subconscious wants us to know, are we looking after the system, which means mind and body? That makes sense.
No, that's brilliant. I've never heard that before, and that makes total sense. Because our subconscious does incredible things, doesn't it, that we just don't realize. And I like that it wants to know that the conscious is taking care of the body. What's your view on my thought that if you know that you're social distancing, if you know that you're washing your hands, if you know you're eating real foods, and you're doing most of the things that you can do to stay safe, and therefore, I talked earlier on, I don't know if you heard it, the fact that I believe the word fear is false expectations appearing real, and therefore divide facts from fear. The facts are I'm doing what I can to stay safe, and therefore let's try now to dial down the anxiety a bit, because I am doing as much as I can do to maybe turn off the news, stop looking at all the horror stories that are out there, and just maybe get into something new, like cooking at home or something. So that was an absolute nonsense question. I hate it when people ask nonsense questions.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's multi-layered. So
see if you can break that down for me, Hannah.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Fear is normal. Anxiety is normal. And I think we compound it and exacerbate it by demonizing it. So first of all, meet the fear where it is, find out what it's about. This is real, so trying to do without it. Like, I can feel anxiety in myself in the last month. Mobilizing to do something is important. Like I said before, it's telling your system you're doing your damnedest to look after it. Actual things like if you're eating well, you're trying to sleep, you're doing some exercise, of course those are important, but the brain's going, that's the connective tissue of life. That's just I was growing my business. I was planning to do this amazing challenge this year, and now I'm just at home. So in a way, our brain doesn't care. We can't force the gratitude. What we can do is, when everything's up in the air, if you imagine most things for people are up in the air, and what humans like is predictability and consistency. Normally, most humans do. So I think it's helpful for people to go, what one balloon can I grab and put down and create a new marker for myself? Because that's what we're looking for in order for us to turn the dial down on anxiety.
Yeah.
What one thing can I do that actually helps me, like pegging a tent out?
Yeah.
Right? How can I pin that down and make it look like it's going to sustain the tricky storm, which is what we're in?
Yeah.
And that's going to be different for everybody.
It's just.
But you're right. I mean, I'm not saying that eating well, all of that is so important. But what I'm interested in, the psychology of that, are people like, what? My life's come down to that? Yeah. So they're having a bit of a backlash against that.
Yeah. You can't force gratuity. I like being grateful. I love that. That's a great saying, because I'm always saying, just be grateful for what you got, kids. Be grateful, but you can't force being grateful.
Right.
That's great.
It's not a decision.
Yeah.
It's not gratitude isn't a decision. It's a process.
That's brilliant.
And then you can start to feel into it, and it becomes more normal to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Anna, it's been brilliant having you on. At the beginning, when we've never met before, we've never spoken before. At the beginning, you said to me, live on air, you said, I've done 30,000 hours doing this. That's really interesting, because I've read so much, and I'm a massive believer in, once you've got to do 10,000 hours of something. You've heard this so many times in books like Bounce and so on. You don't become an expert unless you've done 10,000 hours of conscientious practicing at what you do. You've done 30,000 hours, and my goodness, you can tell it in the way you speak. Your knowledge is fantastic in this area. And if you don't mind, we'd love to have you back on the show at some point.
Of course, my pleasure. And you know, as Lydia was saying, this is amazing, and I'm going to share it with all my contacts and connections. And thank you for doing this too. But yeah, no problem. I'll be back.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for agreeing
to
share it, the show. Wow, two fantastic experts today on controlling the controllables, and I think what we've learned is it's normal to be anxious, and we know, and I keep preaching to my children every day, you've got to be grateful for what you've got, but you can't enforce that. So just I think replay this again, because two great bits of advice there from Lydia and from Anna. Now, let's talk about today's food fact, because we try and do one of these every day. And you might say, well, Steve, number 11 that you did was about the magnificent 7 seeds. Why have you just put it on screen again? Well, my way of cooking, and I don't know about you, is I get into something, and when I get into it, I'm really into it. So when we had the Caldesis on the other day, they talked about making flaxseed bread. So I went away and made flaxseed bread. It tasted absolutely fantastic. And I thought, what else can I use flax seeds for? So last night I put it on the tuna. And then I thought, well, let's have that as its own food fact. Because here's the thing, if you are vegan, then where are you getting your omega-3 from? There's very few places you can get omega-3 from if you're not eating meat and fish. And one of the few exceptions is flax seeds. Flax seeds are extremely rich in omega-3. They're also full of vitamins and minerals and other great stuff. But if you are vegan or vegetarian, what I would say is omega-3 is so important for so many things, from the joints to our heart to our brain, and it's really important that we get the balance between omega-3 and omega-6 correct in our body. Otherwise we have all sorts of problems, including our immune system. And of course, our immune system is the thing at the moment we're trying our best to protect. So if you are vegetarian or vegan, flaxseed oil, loads of flax seeds, great. And even if you're not like me, still upping your omega-3 in every way you can is one of the best things you can do for your health. If you can donate at justgiving.com, that will be fantastic. We desperately need your support for the Trussell Trust, who run 1,200 of our food banks across the UK. More than ever, they need us donating food into the food banks, the collection boxes within the supermarkets. But we're really pleading to get your donations via text or by Just Giving up here. Let's help those that are in real need at the moment, because we want to make sure everybody has got food on the table. It's bless you through these difficult times. My name's Steve Bennett. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today. My son Jack has been driving the show. Oh, and by the way, there he goes again, left and right. There. Boom. That's the sort of things that the food bank are looking for you to donate into the collection boxes within your local supermarket. Now, if you've enjoyed the show, then please do tweet everybody, do go below and do notifications, do forward, what's the other thing we do? Share's the word I was looking for. It's not very good on social media. Go and share with everybody you know. We want to get as many people watching every day as possible, because more people watching means more people donating. Until tomorrow, stay safe and be mindful and listen to some of that great advice we've got around anxiety today, and really do everything you can to put a smile on your own face. And Jack and me, we'll see you tomorrow.